Welcome to the Christian Indie Writers Podcast, where we inform, encourage, and support Christian indie writers on the journey toward publication. My name is Christina Catane, and I write in multiple genres, including Christian dystopian fiction.
I'm Rhonda Hagerman, and I write both fiction and nonfiction. I'm currently working on a series of articles for my hometown historical society.
I'm Jennifer Carl Tong, and I write historical Christian romance.
I'm Jamie Hirschberger, and I write short fiction under the pen name J.R. Nichols.
We like to start each episode with a segment we call What's Up? It's a time to check in with one another and see where we are with our writing and our personal lives. So, what's up, Rhonda?
Well, I'm still working on organizing my historical society, which is very inspiring. I've started taking a notebook with me and jotting down a few ideas for stories. And actually, I came up with a story. My mom is on hiatus right now, the book that we're writing together. So I'm starting to outline my second book, and I'm really kind of excited about it, but that was inspired by me cleaning out the historical society. And my garden's almost done, so that's not so much in the way this week.
Yay!
Awesome. All right, Jamie, what about you?
Well, my husband travels for work. He's been gone a long time, but he's finally back. So we had a family vacation, kayaking down the Ausabo here in Michigan. Summers are beautiful. I got a little sun, so I'm showing up all pinkalicious today. And it's just been really great. Meanwhile, I've been squeezing out those words wherever I can.
Awesome. What about you, Jen? What's up?
I have been trying to write a little every day as well as edit a little every day. I've been wrangling technological issues. Obviously, can't even say the word, let alone deal with that right now. But I'm having a lot of problems with my internet and things like that. So that's been like a stress on me, especially today. But I was doing really good on my 1,300 words a day. Oh, let me say this really quick. After last week's podcast, like I kind of had this like revelation, which I don't know why I didn't have this before, but it's always been my goal that I wanted to publish 4 books a year. So I did the math at 80,000 words a book, approximately. That would be 320,000 words a year. So in order to reach that goal, if I wrote 1,300 words a day, Monday through Friday, I could easily reach that. So that's completely doable. It's like what? 3 sprints, which is an hour and a half. You know, the way we do sprints. And I'm like, I can totally do this. And I totally did it for like 4 days. And then Friday was really bad. I'm like, you know what? That's what the weekend's for. I'll catch up on the weekend because I did that on purpose, the 5 days, so that if I got behind, I could catch up on the weekend. Well, the weekend did not work with my family and the obligations, so that didn't work. Yesterday did not work. So far I'm behind 2,600 words, not even counting today. So, but at least I have a goal in mind, and I'm working towards that. And the editing is still going well. We had a flaws meeting last week, and you guys gave me some really, really great advice about how one of my characters was too mean, and it wasn't, you weren't loving on it. And I was like, what? But then when I let it settle in, I realized they're so right. So just because I love the characters, I'm willing to forgive some things in their actions, and that doesn't mean that everyone, So I'm working that all out too. So.
Awesome.
Well, I think that's exciting because, when we talk next week about how do you keep going even when life gets crazy, you'll be able to speak into that. So
yes.
Yay.
Yes.
Yay for crazy.
Yep.
Awesome.
All right, what about you, Tina?
Well, I had written this whole novel, and I had a manuscript that I sent out to beta readers, and then after that, I decided to rewrite the whole thing because I was just not happy. And I made a personal goal to have the first act, it's a 4-act story, done by the end of June, and I'm really confident that I'm right on track for that. I'm going to be done with the first act, so
Great.
That makes me really happy.
Yay.
Awesome. Very happy.
It's not going to take 10 years this time.
Oh, great.
The 10 years, though, that was your training period, right?
Yes,
that was
that's
getting you
right.
all prepped. And
I wrote in November for 9 of those years.
Right, and that's it, just in November, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So this week's topic is from our Faith and Writing series. What does it mean to be a Christian writer? So, you guys consider yourselves to be writing in the Christian fiction genre?
I personally do. I would say that I'm a Christian writer and I write Christian fiction because obviously the word Christian is actually in my genre title, historical Christian romance. I am dabbling in some contemporary romance, but it's going to be contemporary Christian romance as well. Though I have toyed with the idea of doing sweet romance, which we'll talk about later too. So I personally am in the Christian fiction genre. What about you, Tina?
Hmm.
Well, my current novel is what I'm calling Christian dystopian fiction. But not everything I write is in the Christian genre, but it does come from my Christian worldview. So,
Hmm.
what about you, Jamie?
I'm a Christian who writes, so that's how I would describe myself and what I do.
Hmm. That would be me as well.
All right.
I came across a really cool quote by Flannery O'Connor. She was a Catholic writer, and I've lost the actual wording of the quote, so I'll just give you a summary. She basically said, it's become trendy to say, I am not a Catholic writer, but I am a writer who happens to be Catholic. And she said, I often would like to say I'm not a Southern writer, but I'm a writer who has Southern. Because what happened to her is she just happened to write what she knows, which is the South, and everybody started to correct her. Not everybody from the South, has only one arm, because she always wrote about these really interesting characters. And she said, though, that it's impossible to erase the image of the South that builds up in your mind over a lifetime of being immersed in it, just like it's impossible to remove the marks the sacraments have on your soul. So what she's trying to say is it's really kind of hard sometimes to say you're not a Christian writer, even though what you're writing may not have what people consider traditional Christian elements.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's
So
really good.
what is our motivation then for writing? Are we trying to convert people, spread the gospel, entertain them?
Hmm.
What do you think?
For me, it's first and foremost entertainment. I do want stories that people are like excited to read and they enjoy them. Like the entertainment is first and foremost. But I do feel for myself that God is calling me to have elements of the gospel and have elements um, of of scripture and like that, but that's what I feel is my calling. I don't think every
Hmm.
Christian writer has to do that, but that's what I feel like my books are going to do. So for me, that's
I
what.
would really love to be like some of these older writers that people study in college, and they have like metaphor and allegory going on and things like that. But I feel like I'm really not smart enough to do that yet.
Jamie.
And like I feel like trying to do it would come off like, oh, look at her trying to do this pretentious thing. I don't know if I would even say it's pretentious, but so like I would love for people to be like, oh, I see here what she did. The lion is an allegory for Christ or whatever.
Mhm.
Primarily, I'm just writing to get the story out of my head and onto the paper, and hopefully find an audience that's as excited about reading it as I was about writing it. So like Jen, I just really out to entertain people in a way that they wouldn't be embarrassed to share with their grandma.
That's a great way of putting it.
Right. For me, I think the fiction that I write is definitely entertainment first and foremost, and then some of the other stuff that I write. We're always seeking God's will as Christians and praying and asking God to reveal that to us. And He just said to me one time really clearly, use your words. And so I'm just really, some of my Bible study stuff that I write and stuff is just my exploration of what did He mean by use your words. So.
I think it's good too, like what you were saying about listening to what God wants you to do, because I think that different books are going to have different things in them that God wants out of it. And whether you are a Christian that writes Christian fiction or you're a Christian that just writes fiction or nonfiction, there are things that God probably is calling you to do within that book, whether it is like blatantly spreading the gospel or just informing people of something that they need to know about. So I think that listening to the Holy Spirit is a big thing for that too. But for me, it's easy because my readers
Mhm.
expect a certain
Mhm.
trope. They expect a certain kind of a thing coming from Christian historical fiction. And so I keep to that, but it's my stories, but I keep within that. So for me, because I have a very clear and construct um, parameters that I'm following, it's easier for me. I think that there are probably a lot of listeners out there, though, that aren't within a very strict genre and are trying to figure out, am I just a Christian who writes, or am I a Christian who writes Christian fiction? And so I think it depends on what genre you write as well.
Mhm.
I can really relate to that because when I had the idea, the what if question that led to my novel was, what if we lost the New Testament and we had to live by the Old Testament? And so just because that was the premise of my book, it fit into Christian fiction. But then
Mhm.
I had to decide what my genre was, and it's in the future, so it's dystopian, it's kind of post-apocalyptic. And I had to decide who was my audience, who am I writing this for? And so I don't know that I'm writing it for non-believers to get them saved, but there is a definite story of grace versus the law going on in my book. So what do you guys think? Who are your audience? Your stories,
Mhm.
Jamie?
That's a really good question, and I think it's an important one once you start to do the marketing. I
Yes.
think that my audience, it's pretty kind of specific because I think I write sort of a very light sci-fi, and there's usually some kind of a fun romantic element or something like that. So I tend to believe that my audience is women who enjoy some light science fiction, and that's pretty specific. But they're not specifically Christian people, although I feel like a Christian would feel safe picking up my books because of some of the elements that are typically ascribed to what you would expect from a Christian book.
Mhm.
So I guess more clean, right? I think we're supposed to talk a little bit more on that later.
Hmm.
I think you hit it right on the nail right on the head as far as your genre, though, Jamie, because there are so many science fiction writers out there, and a lot of men read science fiction, but there are a lot of women too. And I think that without it being just about to women or whatever, I think that yours really, because of the humor and all the things you mentioned, I think will speak to women. Because I am a fan of science fiction, even though I don't write it, and I find that in your books, and I really think you hit that nail on the head.
Well, thanks. That's good to hear because when I have to start running ads, I got to know who I'm targeting.
That's right. What about you, Rhonda? Who do you see your audience as?
Well, most of my characters seem to be like early 40s moms, empty nesters, and most of the storylines deal with the women are already Christians. They've already got a Christian worldview, and so the books aren't really getting anyone saved in them, but they're just dealing with Christian life without being overtly Christian. It's like in the background that these people are Christians, and so they look at the world as a Christian would, and um, so I think my audience is going to be empty nesters, maybe new empty nesters, um, Christian women of the 40 age range.
Okay. So we've talked about who our audience is and what our motivation is, but when you call yourself a Christian writer, what do you think the readers expect when they pick up your book?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, again, I think there are, what you would call like a traditional Christian book would be something that might be published by, gosh, I don't even know who the publishers are. Jen? Who?
Oh, Zondervan and
Oh, yeah.
Thomas Nelson and Bethany
Bethany
House
House.
and
Yeah, what are they looking for? Like, how would they say, okay, so here's a Christian book. What are the hallmarks there,
Mhm.
right?
right.
Hmm.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Like what even though we're all choosing to be independently published, what are some of the things that traditional houses look for? Because I mean, think about it, you know, we, even though we've chosen the route of independently publishing, there's, and because we don't want to deal with the gatekeepers, and there's a whole other conversation there, but we, if we want to get into bookstores, if we want to get, then we have to like look at, look at what bookstores are taking from the traditional publishers, right?
Hmm.
And from what I've learned in looking for that kind of information is it's changing quickly. It used to be that your book had to have somebody who was a non-believer who saw the light and was converted, and it had to be part of the story. That's kind of the old school um, criteria for it being considered Christian fiction. But it's changed so much. Now they have so many different genres that they're publishing, and they're calling some of them edgy. So like they kind of go up to the line of what we would traditionally consider a Christian lifestyle. Um, a lot of them believe that grace should be at work in the lives of the characters.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that
Do you think that political correctness? Do you think that political correctness has gone into this?
well,
Are publishers
yeah.
becoming?
Well,
Go ahead.
look, I think it's a matter of the fact that we're a capitalist country and these people are out to make money. And if they're really narrowly targeting only Christians who are going to go buy books, well, then their sliver of customer base is going to be forever shrinking because now with the culture sort of becoming a little bit more open, I mean, even the Christian readers are looking for stuff that is not so necessarily sweet or whatever you would want to say. And so they're trying to get a bigger audience by opening themselves up to different ideas. But, as we're sitting here having this conversation, I'm thinking, what Christian bookstore are we even talking about? Because I know that they're few and far between anymore when used to be every city had one. So maybe that just speaks more to the point that the market for a book that you can demonstrably call a Christian one would be small. I mean, in fact, the bookstore we used to have here, I would have considered more of a gift shop even than a bookstore.
True.
There were so few books available for sale.
True.
Yes, that's true. Unless you wanted to read romance, they had a lot of romance books. But if you'd like to read in other genres like I do, then it was slim pickings sometimes.
That's over the board in all Christian fiction. I mean, there's a meme out there that it's a cartoon, and they're in a church library, and there's like a section that's like empty and it says Christian fiction, and it's like there's like three books, and then there's a bookshelf that says Christian romance, and it's stuffed full, and that's because that's just really what is the largest market within Christian fiction. So that's not just bookstores, that's like everywhere. So
Well, and I wonder kind of what that says. Traditionally, would you agree, Jen, that the readers of Christian romance are women?
Yes.
More than, yes.
Yes.
Okay, and so I would think it's women who are trying to get those amazing love stories that they like so much and the happily ever afters, but in a way that they deem is going to be safe, right?
Yes.
So that they're not sort of pulled down a path of lusting or coveting or something like that.
yes.
Because everybody, the women obviously like their happily ever afters and they're falling in love and other swoony moments. But it seems like in other genres, Christians are just looking elsewhere. So are they turning then to clean work? Are they just saying, well, I'll skip these 5 pages when it should have faded to black and it maybe didn't with the romance stuff, if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where are the Christian readers finding things to read?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I wonder if it just is a mirror on our society. Like I know I've had conversations with other Christians that read lots of things that I wouldn't read, but or conversely, watch things on television that I wouldn't watch on television because they say, well, I'll skip past this, or but the storyline is really, it's so funny, you have to watch it. Yeah, there's things in it that go against my belief system, but it's really funny, and I wonder if that's kind of what's happening with books, is that to get a good quality story in other genre, I believe, not not just because I write romance, but I believe that there are plenty of Christian romances out there that are quality, that you don't need to go to the others. But I don't read as much of dystopian or science fiction or like that. So maybe they're going elsewhere looking for things that, or maybe, I don't know. I remember a conversation you and I had, though, Jamie, about just like how far can you go and it still be. So I'm wondering if some of these other genres that are edgier in other in non-Christian format, if it doesn't ring true trying to write a Christian version. Like you and I had a conversation about foul language. In my second book, the guy, the love interest, he's not a good guy at the beginning. And I
Sadly, no,
mentioned
he's not.
no. And I mention him swearing a few times. I don't put the swear word in there, but I mention it. I can get away with that in romance because I'm mentioning it. But in a hard crime novel, like I don't write those. So, but in a hard crime novel, if you're writing about the bad guy and he says, "Oh darn you," like is it just not read right? I don't know. So let's talk. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that might be part of
Well,
the reason why there's not as many Christian novels in those genres?
as a fan of those kind of novels, there are some pretty well-known authors in the Christian genre, Ted Decker, and those kind that write edgier stuff, and they don't include the cursing, but they would probably say something like, "And the curse is spewed from his mouth," or
Right, that's right.
like that, and then instead of quoting what they're actually saying,
Right.
and the thing is then in between their books that they've published, then you're like, oh, come on, I need something to read, right? So,
Right.
Right, because you can think of Ted Decker off the top of your head, but like how long would your list be if I said, okay, quick, name every Christian author in any other genre but romance, right? And then we turn to Jen and we say, Jen, give us as many Christian romance writers as you can think of. I bet you her list would be like, there's just sort of a dearth. But then I guess maybe it's kind of what Jen said, slapping the label Christian on there. What does that do? I guess to get back to the original question. You slap that it's a Christian book on the cover or the description or the genre. And what does it do except send some people running maybe? Because they're going to expect what? Like, what is it that makes it a Christian book, right?
Right.
right.
A quick side note, I just thought of like in non-Christian books, romance is also the largest. So it could just be something in our society. So, but I'm sorry, go ahead, Tina.
Well, I was started looking at Christian publishers because I was trying to find, a neat little list of this is the rules for writing Christian fiction. This is what is expected, and it just wasn't out there. So I started looking at publishing. If you want to send your manuscript to a Christian publisher, what are their guidelines? So almost across the board, they want demonstrably Christian content. So not a wink and a nod, not a little smile and a little bit of niceness and some cleanness. They want it to be demonstrably Christian. The conversion scene is not necessary anymore, and they don't want you presenting the gospel in a way that's argumentative or trying to drive home your worldview with a sledgehammer. They don't want any denominationally held doctrines. So they probably wouldn't want you to have speaking in tongues, for instance, in your story because it would alienate the half of the Christian world that doesn't do that. So,
And that's what's interesting. I was looking up the ACFW we were talking about, and what their statement of faith is very short. We believe that Jesus is God, and we believe that the Bible is true, and that's pretty much it. Because I think they're trying to leave an openness for, Catholics and Seventh-day Adventists and any other variety of Christians to join and have membership. But yeah, so anyway, they're not wanting you to hinge a plot point on something that is possibly controversial.
And don't you think that's something that even as independent authors, we have to think about, even though we're not going to try to go through the gatekeepers at the publishing houses, we do want people to buy our books. I do want when people go to Amazon and they type in historical Christian fiction, when they find me, I want them to be able to buy the book. So we do have a local Christian bookstore. It's independently owned. I do want them to stock my book. But do you think that maybe that's one of the reasons why there's so much more apt bookstores are so much more apt to pick up a book from Thomas Nelson or from Bethany House because they've already done all that work. Actually, I think it's probably the agents that have done all that work, but to make sure that there's nothing in there that's controversial, anything in there that does not go along with their statement of faith and like that, where every independent author that would come to them with a book say, will you carry my book, they'd have to read it and find out for themselves. So we, as Christian, as independent authors, we have so much more freedom, but it's also a responsibility on our shoulders too, that we're going to have to face those kind of walls. We're going to figure out a way of climbing over them. And you mentioned the ACFW. What was the ECPA? You mentioned that the other day, Tina. Joining legitimate organizations like that. Well, okay, ACFW is the American Christian Fiction Writers. What does ECPA stand for?
Evangelical Christian Publishing Association.
All right, so joining organizations like that will help give you validity. That will help get your foot in the door for a lot of places. It'll probably help on Amazon for those. Some readers don't care. They read the blurb like, oh, I want to read that, and they go for it. But there'll be some, because it's Christian, there'll be some that'll be a whole lot pickier and will say, well, how do I know this matches up? And by being part of those groups, and you can be able to put the stamps on your websites and like that, that will help with your legitimacy.
And who knows, maybe one day your book will become the subject of a Bible study. I've done that before. Where, what was that one really popular book about that was based on the book of Hosea?
Oh, Redeeming Love by Francis.
Redeeming Love, yeah. And when I was going to use that book in my Bible study, it was very reassuring to me to know that the publisher was reputable and that I could be sure that I wasn't going to run into some crazy biblical thing that wasn't true.
All right. That's a great one to bring up, actually, Tina, because if for those of you who have not read it, it's a difficult read at times. There's child abuse in it, and not graphic, but graphic enough. And the woman, the main character, is a prostitute, and I don't know that book would have made it very far independently published, because I think that the people that would be buying it would be like, I don't know, prostitute, child abuse, this can't be a Christian book. But because she had, I believe it was Thomas Nelson behind it, that's over, my book's over there, I think that helped. But yeah, so if you're writing a book right now that is kind of edgy, you might have a bigger uphill battle, but as far as romance. But yeah, that's an interesting one to bring up, because that one it's still controversial. There are people that, if you ever go onto Amazon to that page and read the comments, there are a lot of haters. But it's a great book.
They better stay away from Hosea also then.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so what does it look like, and maybe Jamie and Rhonda can address this, to be a Christian writing not necessarily Christian books?
Well, go for it, Rhonda. No, you go. I've been flapping my jaws.
Well, can you make that a little bit more specific? What do you mean by what does it look like?
Well, do you have Christian themes, or are you going to market it to Christians? What are you going to...
Well, I'll tell you. The book that I was inspired to start outlining the other day, basically it's going to follow 3 pioneer families from New York and the trials and tribulations to Genesee County, Michigan. Genesee County, New York to Genesee County, Michigan. And 2 of the families are Christian, and one of the families is, they're not Christian. They just have they're agnostic, I suppose. And I think that we'll see that maybe the Christians had a better time of it because they had something to lean on outside of themselves And, of course, God would be the number one thing to lean on. And so I'm going to make sure that that point is brought forward. So it's not going to necessarily be a Christian book, but it's going to emphasize the Christianity in at least one of the families.
Okay. What about you, Jamie?
Well, I've written some really kind of farcical stuff that has nothing to do with sort of religion at all much. And then I've written some stuff that I have been happily surprised to see moral lessons or characters who show growth in a way that is more redeeming. So I don't know that I would ever market what I've written as Christian, with the exception of one short that is currently languishing. But I do think that I could market most of what I write as clean. And it's so funny, too, because, so if I say I write clean fiction, then I'm sitting there thinking about my piece where a bunch of people get, like, shot and killed. And I'm like, so can I still call this, like, a clean fiction book? And it's just really kind of mind-boggling when you start to think about how people have expectations of what they're going to get when they pick up your book. Like, it starts with the cover, I wasn't expecting sci-fi because you put a creepy forest on the front, or I was expecting a romance because you have, whatever. And when you're writing cross-genre, it really makes stuff a little tough. I hope I answered your question. What was the question?
And something else I'd like to add to that, too, is that, Jamie, your writing is so fantastic. You're going to have just fans everywhere. And they're going to say, I want to know more about this author. And they're going to find out through your website and your other whatever publicity that you are Christian. And that is a witness also. Right. Even though it's not laying it out in the book.
Yeah, and I think that I don't think I did justice to the Flannery O'Connor quote, because she said, yes, I would like to say rather that I am a writer who happens to be Catholic. And what she says is, and I think that this stops discussions that should be happening. When people stop saying I'm a Christian writer and they start saying I'm a writer who happens to be Christian, it stops a conversation that could happen. That could be something where you're planting a seed or watering a seed, and just, in time, God will give that increase. So I really appreciate that encouragement. It's very, very edifying to hear that. Thank you.
Well, there are some pretty famous authors who wrote books that had Christian themes that didn't market their books as Christian books. Some of the most famous ones that we all have heard of, like J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and C.S. Lewis's Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. And C.S. Lewis had a quote that said, "What we want is not more little books about Christianity, but more little books by Christians on other subjects with their Christianity latent."
Oh. It's a nice quote.
Yeah, so, like my relationship with Jesus Christ informs every other part of my life. Whether it's when I'm watching on TV, what books I read, which movie I might go to the movie theater to see, what I do in the voting box. My relationship with Jesus Christ informs all of that. And so that also comes out in what I write.
Very, very true.
Yeah.
So whether you're a Christian writer who writes Christian fiction, or you're just a Christian writer who just writes whatever you want to write, that your words can still honor Christ, whether or not you mention Christ ever in the books. Not everybody's called to write Christian themed books, because there is a whole slew of people out there reading books that would never pick up my book. Never. Because they would see that it's a Christian book and they would already decide that it's not for them. This is one of the reasons why I talked about possibly writing and submitting to the Hallmark Channel for their new ebook imprint. Even though I want to be independently published, I like the idea of getting my name out there through channels that aren't Christian, and see how many people brings to my Amazon page and my Barnes and Noble page. So
That's smart.
yeah, good stuff.
Right. So I think the key thing that you were saying there was about honoring Christ with your words. And I know that one of you had some scriptures you wanted to share. I don't remember.
Well, it's just what I found was from Got Questions, right? And it was kind of like, what does it really mean to honor God? So what would it mean to honor Christ with your words? And I just grabbed this quote, and there are scripture references in the quote. But we will link the quote maybe so that it says, when we delight in the Lord, seek him in everything we do, and make choices that reflect the place he has in our heart, we bring him the greatest honor, which I really appreciated, because it wasn't a laundry list of thou shalt and thou shalt nots, as far as how to honor God, how to honor Christ. And the scriptures that they referenced were Psalm 37:4, 1 Chronicles 16:11, and Isaiah 55:6. So, I just wanted to share that.
And I've heard a study on the book, the word honor. When you look it up, in the original language, and you start looking at what does this really mean, and one of the things that it means is to make known. And so in our actions and in the way that we live our lives, to make Christ known. I know there's this great quote that's always attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, and there's some debate whether he actually said it or not, but to preach the gospel at all times and when necessary, use words. And okay, so do we want to talk about swearing?
We kind of did a little bit already, I guess. Kind of covered that, and we talked about clean reads already, and there's a lot of things out there that, confuse us. Like we talked about the sweet with heat, and, but...
Yeah.
So,
right, it's that whole, I guess, the bottom line is, who is your audience, and how, you never get a second chance to make a first impression kind of a thing. I mean, my children and I have these conversations all the time about some choices people might make that might limit their opportunities in life, with how they decorate their body or how they style themselves, if they have good hygiene, whatever. You are sort of telling the world something about yourself with how you present. And so if you are in one of these genres that is confusing to us, which we are not even going to get into, it's kind of like, is this like a Christian thing? Is this like a clean thing? Is this just a, I can charge you $7.99 and make some money off of it thing? I don't even know. But that's for each Christian to kind of personally bear that reputation that they're putting out there and that representation of Christ. I mean, just try not to do anything, I guess, that you're going to regret in 20 years. That's the advice my dad always gave me about tattoos.
Tattoos and writing.
You don't want to put out a work that you're going to grow spiritually and then turn around and go, that so gives a negative impression of our Lord or whatever. That's just my granny advice right there.
And do we want to have like a shack-like controversy about our book, which would probably drive sales, but do we want those kind of sales? We have that weight on our shoulders.
And these contradictory genres, I guess we can call them. They're kind of a joke, if you ask me. Only make, I think, Christian writing look bad, especially independently Christian writing, because there are so many. Let's just be honest. There are so many bad indie books out there, and the bad Christian indie books, I think, have a bigger impact on people, and people assume that if you're independently published in the Christian field, some people, that you weren't good enough to get published, which is so not the truth. But like you said, Tina, it's like a weight on our shoulders. This is like, other people have tried writing something and calling it Christian, and it wasn't. And so that's something we need to be aware of as Christian authors, is that we, like Jamie said, make sure that what we put out there is something we're not going to regret in 20 years. And just try to be the best example of not only Christ, but of Christian authors that you can be.
Right. Yeah, it kind of goes back to our little spiel that we say at the end of our podcast about may all of your words honor Christ, whether they're coming from our mouths or whether we're typing them. Okay. All right. So now it's time for the feeding of the backs. It's feedback time. And here's a reminder of how feedback works. Sometimes we submit a piece to our group for a full-on critique, but sometimes, like here on the podcast, we submit a raw, fresh, unedited piece. This helps us develop a safe community for receiving criticism because we each take turns being utterly vulnerable. Because these are new, unedited works, we do not give criticism, only encouragement. So this week we were once again given 15 minutes to write, and we did a kind of a crazy little exercise, and I'm going to let Jen explain it because it was her idea, and I don't want to get it wrong.
Yes, but before you do, can you guys like hear me okay? Because I just realized my headphones have not been plugged in this whole time. It's just been like my computer.
Oh,
And so like if I'm good, I'm not going to plug in, so it will change my
I hear you
level.
perfect.
You're fine.
Okay, great. We'll leave it like this. Great.
All right.
Okay,
Awesome.
go Jen.
All right, so based on a game that I've played before, and Jamie pointed out that it was kind of like an improv game that they do in improv, one person started with a sentence, and we all typed it out, and then another person gave us the second sentence, then the third, then the fourth, and then the rest of us then we all had to write the rest of the story individually. So it sounded like a great idea. Maybe not so much. So can I go first? Oh, go ahead, Tina.
Before we share, let's each say our sentence that we gave.
Good idea.
Oh.
So that the listeners can know like what our
Who's
sentences were.
responsible for this?
And then if they want to like pause it and write their own crazy story, they could do that.
Okay.
Okay,
That's a good
so
idea.
I'll go first because I gave the first sentence. 1,000 specks of light filled the obsidian sky.
It had been a long journey to the dark sky park, but it was worth it.
No sooner than their eyes adjusted to the dark than they saw the sky split.
And this is what I was left with. Those three. Thank you very much. So I said they knew the time had come.
Okay, now I think when we read it though, we should all read all of that again.
Yes.
'Cause
Oh yeah, I just wanted everyone to hear who gave what. So.
Yeah.
You know what, Jamie? You sound quieter now. Are you sure you didn't unplug by accident?
No, well maybe. Let me plug in, and if I blow you out, I'll unplug.
Okay.
Okay, so hold on, I gotta.
All right, how's this? Is it
Real
really
quiet.
super loud or
No, really super quiet.
how's this? How's this? Still talking? Hello. How is my microphone? Oh, you know what? Maybe I have this or
Now you're mute.
okay, am I not mute now?
Yep.
Can you hear me okay?
Really quiet, but it's okay. We got you at least.
All right.
All
Good.
right. All right. I would like to go first if nobody minds.
Go ahead.
Because it'll make everyone else's look better. And I would just like to start off with that this is the reason, this right here will be a good example of why I do not write science fiction. Are we ready? Okay. 1,000 specks of lights filled the obsidian sky. It had been a long journey to the dark sky park, but it was worth it. No sooner had their eyes adjusted to the dark than they saw the sky split. They knew the time had come. Flarflax reached for the space globe wand. It would bring little protection at a time like this, but it brought comfort somehow. Do you think they want to harm us? Fleablubs asked. Yes, of course. Yes, he thought. Of course not, Flarflax said with far more conviction than he felt. A space vessel squeezed through the sky split and hurled itself toward the gathering of Flimberlings. It wasn't a large vessel, just barely larger than the subway cars used in Metro Flamlucken. I can't even say it. Flamlucken. But its shiny metal was a strange contrast to the darkness of their world. Flames shot out from one end of the vessel as it righted itself and came to land in the open field. Every Flimberling held its breath as the giant hatch cranked open. Light poured from the opening, nearly blinding them. And then it appeared. Flarflax had never seen anything so horrific. The thing was about 29 flaxflugens tall and had 4 thin sticks jutting out of its core. 2 of the sticks moved, propelling the beast forward into the opening where the hatch once stood. The other 2 sticks moved as well, bending and raising themselves. They took the helmet off the beast, and what lay beneath was even more gruesome. The head, or at least Flarflax assumed it was the head, was small, with 2 eyes. How could that thing even see a Flumelus with eyes that small? And the holes in the head. How could its flabberstugan stay in place with all those holes? Flarflax's stomach lurched when the biggest hole began to move. "Excuse me," the strange creature said. "Could you tell me how to get back to Earth? I seem to have taken a wrong turn."
That was so good.
Whatever.
I have
It
no idea if
was.
you were being obscene or not.
Well, since I'm a Christian author, we already discussed this, and I'm not
Oh,
being
yes.
obscene.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, I thought that was really fun.
I did too.
Yeah.
Good.
I like
Yeah.
how they squeezed through the split in the sky too.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
I thought that was very
And
descriptive.
I really liked how it was a wrong turn. I have no evil intent whatsoever. Just looking for directions. And I bet it was the wife whatever monster
Right.
asking for the directions.
Yeah.
Did you get that, like, it was just a human,
Yes.
but they thought it was
Oh, that's hilarious.
That was my favorite part, that it was just a person and they were the monster.
disgusting?
That's great. That's
I
great.
love that.
Okay, good.
Very
I'm
fun.
glad Tina got that at least. Okay. Okay, who's next?
I'm still not blowing anybody out, am I?
Nope.
Nope.
All right, great.
Do you want to go to next, Jamie?
Okay, just in case someone else got the same riff that I did off of this. Okay, 1,000 specks of light filled the obsidian sky. It had been a long journey to the dark sky park, but it was worth it. No sooner had their eyes adjusted to the dark than they saw the sky split. They knew the time had come. The congregation sprung into action as a roll of thunder followed the flash of light in the sky, and the little girl watched as the open field became a flurry with preparations. Men and women everywhere began to shout orders to one another and to their children. In the big tent, the leaders were busy, stirring copious amounts of grape drink mix into the massive coolers filled with water. Judy,
Uh-oh.
Stephen Proctor, should say Ann Stephen, well, whatever, gathered her 12 children around her and began passing out provisions from the boxes in the tailgate of their 63 Chevy. "Sally Mae," she said, and placed a large carton into the arms of the little girl's oldest sister. Sally Mae was often called upon for tasks like this, even though their much older brother Simeon could often be found lazing in a nearby haystack or chatting with the girls from the village down at the garden gate. The little girl held out her arms, offering to bear some of the burden for Sally Mae, but Sally Mae's eyes did not even deign to look down at her. She carried the carton some 10 feet from the truck and spread out 3 Afghans Grandma Nilsson had made long before the little girl had been born. When Sally Mae returned to the truck for whatever other work Ma had for her, the little girl rolled herself up in the Afghan with the red and blue squares, her favorite. A warm breeze had been blowing from the east all afternoon, but now the air was still, and the little girl felt the hairs on her arms stand on end. She waited for the rain to come, but it did not. She waited still longer, then popped her head out to see if anyone had missed her when she had become buried alive in Granny's blanket. It seemed not. Sally Mae was busy braiding Bobby Joe's hair, and Mama was nursing the new baby. So the little girl stood and dragged her blanket over to a nearby hill and spread the blanket. She then proceeded to lay down upon it, roll all the way down, ending at the bottom safely cocooned in wrapped layers of yarn. She dragged the blanket up the hill again and wondered if Jonathan or one of her sisters might be interested in trying out the game, but they were all having a snack of some kind. She could see little Dixie cups being passed around. Remembering the Last Supper juice she was forced to drink each Sunday, she decided she would return to her party after the snack time was over. She made her way down the hill several more times, each time inventing a new adventure. Now she was a pilot, taking a test run in a new form of airplane. Now she was a genie with the power to make the Afghan fly down the hill. Now she was a stray dog wrapped up in a blanket and cast into the river, never to be seen again. Finally tired of her game, hair full of leaves and knees stained green, she returned to her family's pile of blankets, only to find the entire congregation had fallen asleep. Disappointed that this campout had not featured any campfire stories, she wriggled into a spot between her two biggest sisters and went to sleep herself. When she woke, two men in uniform stood over her, smiling and cheering. "This one's alive," one called to some other uniformed men far across the clearing.
Oh my god.
That's
Jamie.
so sad.
Oh my word. Ugh.
Oh, the innocence of the little girl, and you just wrote her so well. It just makes you want to
Yeah.
cuddle her up and hug her and tell her that it's gonna be okay. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Wow.
So good. So terrible, but so good. Oh.
Thanks.
That was it's amazing to me how well you can write. You write so much in such a short time, and it's so good.
Well,
Just
thank
blows me
you.
away.
Appreciate that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was immediately just inspired by the time had come. these people, poof, I know exactly.
As soon as they pulled out the Kool-Aid, I
I
was
know.
like,
Yeah.
oh no.
Yeah, I was like, no, this can't be. No.
And I was
I was
like, please
careful
don't
not to
die,
say-
little girl.
Poor old Sally Mae.
That's what she gets for
Yeah.
not giving her the time of day.
Mhm.
Okay. Are we all recovered from that?
Yeah, who wants to follow
not.
that?
Should we move on to Rhonda?
All right. Okay, so this time I typed
wipe
it
my
instead of
tears.
writing it.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. And I realized why I started handwriting these exercises because I do too much editing. So I've got like, I don't know, 300 words maybe, and they're all, anyway. you guys can
Fantastic. They're
decide.
all fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. 1,000 specks of light filled the obsidian sky. It had been a long journey to the dark sky park, but it was worth it. No sooner than their eyes adjusted to the dark, they saw the sky split. They knew the time had come. Once I pulled my eyes away from the scene above me, I looked at the hand squeezing mine, then followed it up to the tired, wrinkled face it belonged to. I didn't know tears were flowing down my cheeks until Grandma released my hand and reached up to wipe them away with the handkerchief in her frail hand. "No reason to cry, darling," she comforted me. "I told you this would happen." She was right. She believed this day would come even though no one else did. Occasionally you'd hear someone whispering from their seat behind me at the diner, but hush as soon as I turned toward them. Occasionally there were stories on the news about some conspiracy theory making a ruckus, stirring up people into believing his wild ideas. In general, believers like me were something to be made fun of. "Oh, Grandma, I'm so glad you were here with me." I looked around to find my parents and sister. My parents were gesturing wildly toward the sky. I caught my dad sneaking a glance at my grandma with a new look in his eye. He'd never believed either. My sister looked like she was in a trance. She'd never spent much time thinking about anything other than herself. I don't think time was moving. Everything seemed to be moving through molasses. I looked up to check the sky again to be sure this really was happening. There was still a trail in the sky, but now the ship was hovering above the treetops. I turned to ask Grandma if she knew that was happening. I turned to ask Grandma if she knew what was happening, but I couldn't form the words. I'd only seen the woman stand beside me in photos. That was it.
Oh,
was in
what
time.
happened?
Golly.
Is it the rapture?
No, because there's a ship.
Oh, okay.
Originally, I was going to do the rapture. Then I thought, well, you guys are going to expect that. Maybe one of you wrote about it, so I wanted to do, I don't know, alien, I guess.
Awesome.
Wow,
That's
that's
awesome.
great. So you guys were all a bunch of tinfoil hat people, and Grandma knew they'd be coming for you.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
it the
I don't know-
Flemmerlings coming to visit?
It was. I mean, I don't know how you knew the name of my people.
It's crazy.
It was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
They
I
would
really-
be scared to come here with all us monsters.
With all the
Yeah, they
holes in
should
our
be.
heads.
Yeah.
But I was really sad that you ran out of time because that would be something I would like to see completed. Great work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. All right, Tina. We're all
Okay.
excited to hear yours.
Okay,
Great job,
it's
Rhonda.
different than all of yours. So,
Oh.
Here we go. 1,000 specks of light filled the obsidian sky. It had been a long journey to the dark sky park, but it was worth it. No sooner had their eyes adjusted to the dark when they saw the sky split. They knew the time had come. The multitudes of creatures that streamed through the gash in the sky were hideous to behold. Covered in green slime with 12 eyeballs. Their huge piranha-like mouths snapped as they ran, spittle spraying from their lips. They each swung a spiked ball from their hand and screamed a high-pitched wail that made the ears of the earthlings feel as though they would burst. Adolfo pulled his laser sword and planted his feet firmly on his hover disc, ready for whichever creature came into reach. The anticipation of this day had worn on all the warriors, and now the battle was a relief and the reward for the hours of anticipation. As he sliced arms and heads and feet off of the grotesque monsters, slime flew from their innards and coated Adolfo from head to foot. His grip on his laser sword grew slick, and he gripped down tighter to keep it from slipping from his grasp. One by one, the monsters burst and disappeared as he and his teammates made short work of them. He could hear Rodolfo cheering as he watched the last one pop with a splurt of slime. Lights flashed and music played before giant letters flashed across the sky. "Level up!" with a swirling arrow beneath it. "This is awesome!" cried Athena. "It took so long to get here. Why didn't we buy it sooner?" "I think I'm going to be sick," moaned Cristola, yanking the virtual reality mask from his face and racing for the bathroom. "Come on, guys. Let's go kick some butt." Adolfo pushed the button on his controller, and again the dark sky park became larger and larger on the screen. The sky split, and a new horde of monsters spewed forth in their direction.
Yay! I knew it was
really
halfway
good.
through. I'm like, I bet it's a video game. Awesome.
I didn't. I was surprised.
Yeah, that's
Yep,
awesome.
it got me too. And I like that there was a cameo of your granddaughter's name.
It's always the best.
That's a grandma. I
Yeah.
love
Well,
it.
and I was having trouble coming up with other names.
Oh,
Yeah, when you're in a hurry, right? You just grab whatever name.
Yeah.
I liked that line about they were ready for battle, and this finally, they were tired of waiting around for the battle to be happening. I love that particular
Yeah.
line.
Great job.
Yeah, very good job, everybody.
Yeah.
Fun. That was fun.
We are awesome.
So that wasn't such a bad activity that I made up. So it was
No, it was good. Yeah.
It stretched us, and isn't that the point of these exercises, is to
yeah.
Yep.
stretch us as a writer?
Yes.
Okay, it's time to visit the accountability corner where we check in with one another to make sure we are each moving forward on our journey toward publication. Of course, there are many paths along this journey, and each looks a little different. And we all know that everyone moves at his or her own pace. So in our group, we each set our own SMART goals, goals that are significant, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Then we announce them here on the podcast. So, Jen, how are you doing?
Well, I kind of explained a little bit at the beginning of the podcast, but I am doing okay. My goals for this week are very similar: 1,300 words a day, 5 days a week. Keep editing and trudging along on book 3 to try to get that better. By next podcast, my goal is to have that first scene in the first 2 scenes in the book I'm editing, where the characters aren't so terrible. Try to make them a little bit more lovable, so that I can maybe ask you guys to read it again and see if I'm on the right track. And to have my 1,300 words times 5. What is that?
So it would be 6,000.
Math.
If it's five for the 1,000, so that's 5,000, right?
Mhm.
And then another 3,000 for the 600. So would that be 8,000 words?
Sure. 3, 6, nope, 75.
Okay, don't worry. I just homeschool my children.
That's okay.
They're all going to turn out great, I promise.
They are great kids. They are
I
already turning
homeschool
out
my
great.
son too, and he teaches me math. That's how we do it at our house.
So that's where I'm at right now. So what about you, Rhonda?
well, I'm going to do one more week of 5 article outlines and then 2 or 3 completed articles. And that'll be the last of that. And then from then on, I'll start doing just like 2 completed articles a week or something. But I'm starting the outlining of the next book. The book I'm writing with my mom right now, for the rest of June and the month of July, we are taking that off because Mom's other work is sort of in the way right now. So anyway, I'm going to take that time to work on that outline so that when we're done with the first one, or when we're ready to set it aside, we'll be able to get ready on this one.
Awesome.
How did you do with your goals? Did you get 5 outlines a day? Like, how did you end up doing?
Well, it was a week. It wasn't a day.
Oh,
The outlines. I mean, I appreciate
'Cause that
you
would be a lot.
thinking I'm that awesome. No, yes, that was very attainable for me.
Oh, good.
Especially with all the gardening and everything that, that's almost done. And, yeah, so I did well. I'm pleased with my progress.
Okay, Jamie?
So my goal was to write 5,000 words between the last podcast and this one, and I did meet that goal. I wrote, with today's writing exercise, I got to 8134, which makes me very happy, 8,000 words. But I will say, my husband being home really kind of throws everything a little funny. Some of those days it was a real struggle to get out the 500 words. So I do think I'm going to stick with the goal of 5,000 because the way that I am wired, I also have a goal that I do not phrase it as for 1,000 days in a row, I will. But Ray Bradbury prescribed, he called it for hygienic purposes, which makes me think of taking a shower.
Right.
But I think he just means basically for keeping your writerly chops, lubricated, if you will. He recommended that every night for 1,000 nights, you read one short story, one poem, and one essay. And I threw on top of that a Bible verse, because I thought, well, if I can make time to read all of this other stuff, I can make time to read. So I've got sort of that I feel I have to do every day, and I have this weird compulsion-y feeling about it. And then, so I'm trying to not make this all feel like a big burden that's like on me. So I'm keeping the writing goal at 5,000 until I figured out my rhythm to see if I want to bump that up. But right now I'm really pleased that I'm turning out as many words as I am.
Okay. Well, like I said earlier, I want to have Act 1 of my novel done by next Sunday, and I want it to be 15 to 20,000 words. And I'm at 10,000 words right now, so if I write 1,000 words a day on Act 1, then I will have reached my goal, and then some.
Awesome.
So,
yeah.
And I'm also doing the Ray Bradbury 1,000 Nights thing also. So.
Yeah, how are you finding that?
I kind of veered away from his recommended books, and I've just been finding my own literature to read because
Bless you.
I was having trouble getting into the stuff he recommended. So.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think we should have a talk about that someday because the way that they wrote is so different. So yeah, sorry.
All right. I think now is a good time to remind our listeners that we have an excellent resource available to you when you join our mailing list. In addition to never missing an episode of the Christian Indie Writers podcast, you get a free download of our critique cheat sheet, which will help you both give and receive critique. So click the link below and join our mailing list and receive your free cheat sheet. And this concludes the Christian Indie Writers podcast. Join us next week when our topic will be faith, family, and career, fitting it all in. So until next week, may your pen be prolific, your deadlines be met, and may all of your words honor Christ.
Amen. Bye.
Bye.